This is Jacqueline White. Today we're going to be interviewing Mr. Bob Dorough of Bonham. He's going to tell us about the years that he's spent growing up and living in Fannin County. Bob?
Yeah. I was trying to think in a way why possibly that I remembered so much, about, I'll say 28 and 9 along there. I was selling newspapers around the square, and that just kind of helped to fix in your mind, I'll say, the different businesses or firms that were around about that time, your customers, in other words. And of course, I don't remember one that wasn't nice to me. I think they were great people in that time. Uh-huh. And it's just, it's something like that. I remember pretty well, but I can't sequence the time that they were in a certain location, I'll say. But, kind of starting out, I don't know whether this is of any value at all, but starting out, say, up here across from Smithmore Williams. Now, wait a minute, I'll start over here at the Simmons Grocery Company. I sold a paper to one of the Simmons there, and that was a nice family. I don't know whether you recall, that's for your time, I guess.
Well,
this is a wholesale grocery outfit that existed over there before Barney Gross got it, And there was a huge building that they stored groceries in. And anyway, and as you would start up the street, of course, Francis Steger, what was that, Higginbottom?
Steger Lumber Company.
And anyway, I sold a paper in there to someone, and I was coming up the way, and of course, I think Bland Smith used to hang out a lot at Smithmore Williams, and he'd usually buy a paper. And across the street was a firm, a grocery business, by Sid Smith. Now, I don't know whether you ever heard of Sid Smith or not.
I have.
And but Mr. Smith, he was a very, I'll use the word severe man. He's just all business with, but whenever maybe you'd think he's being a little hard, but then you'd detect a bit of a smile that would kind of creep across his face, and you'd think, well, he isn't mad at me too much. He's just trying to kid me. But I guess next door there, and this is something that I can't recall. I bet I was 15 maybe when F.R. Elkins moved in next door, the grocery business. Somewhere along, I was practically grown then. But you know what? There was something that was that attracted so many people in that time. Jeff Harden had a little hamburger stand in between two buildings. It was almost in between two firewalls. It wasn't, it wasn't half as big as this room, say from here to the wall. But you could go in, and we'd barter a lot in those times. You'd give him a paper, and he'd give you a hamburger and a drink.
Pretty good deal.
Right.
But you could get, when times were real hard, you could get 2 hamburgers for a dime. And then he got money hungry and went to 10 cents. But on up the way, of course, there's John Pierce. And I always tried to get up the stairs. And John, he'd say, Dorough, you're not going up there. I better not get into all the...
Well, just tell him why.
But I liked, I was thinking, I remember one time I was trying to slip up the stair, and he said, Dorough, come on back down here. You're not going up there. You don't have any business there. I think I was 8 or 9. And he said, your daddy'd have me up for the grand jury.
He would have,
He said, you just stay down there. But he was nice to me, and he would give you food. I mean, he wouldn't let you pay for it. He was just that kind of guy. He was good-hearted. I liked the man. But anyway, the Spivies had a store next to them there. And I don't know, they had sold clothing. That's Reed and Reed's father. And then Robert was in there. That's the brother of Reed, and the older Reed, I mean. And Anyway, then I guess next door was the First National Bank. No, of course, later on, and I can't recall who preceded Saunders Drug in that, but
I don't know that either. I know who came after, but I don't know who was
yeah,
there
they
first.
came in here, I think, from Bastrop, Texas, and John Bacon was a good fella, and there never was a nicer lady than, let's see, oh my word, Eloise Saunders. She'd bake cakes and things and have them ready when we kids would get out of the 10:30 later on in the years, and it was just, it was always fun to go by. You could go by the house and then, I don't know, it'd be 15 to 20 kids in there drinking Cokes and eating cake. And she always provided. She felt like you were better off at her house if you wanted to roll back the rug and dance a little than you would be.
Half of those kids were Saunders too.
We'd end up in a lot of trouble if it hadn't been for Eloise, but she was a dear. She really was. And Betsy was, well, she liked to play the piano. We'd like to be entertained by the music that she'd play, but it was kind of like that. Let's see now, where was it? Oh yeah, then the First National Bank. At that time, J.B. Scarborough was the president, not Dick Saunders. Everybody thinks that Dick started the bank, but I think Mr. Scarborough probably was considered to be the founding man. Across the street in the old Peeler building was Ray Peeler, and I knew so much about their drug business, pharmaceuticals, in other words, because Dietz had an office up above. And see, there was Daddy's office and Clyde Neville and I want to say John Neville was up on the 3rd floor. That's Dr. John.
What about Donaldson? Wasn't he up there?
Yeah, Mr. Donaldson, that's right, at the head of the stairs and on the west side there, remember, Tom? But I want to say everything good I can about Mr. Peeler, because as far as prescriptions went in that day and time, he was good to people. If they didn't have the money to pay, he'd just throw up his hands and laugh and said, "Oh, you can pay me sometime," like that. Of course, some of them did, but most of them didn't.
Yeah.
And Ray Jr. was a lot that way. He really was. I remember cases in the district clerk's office there when they'd try a divorce case, and there'd be some woman that wasn't too well healed, and they'd say, come in the office where I was, and they'd say, "How much do I owe you, Mr. Peeler?" And he hadn't even gotten a deposit. He'd put the deposit up maybe himself. But anyway, he'd say, "Oh, bake me a pie sometime."
Oh,
See?
nice
And
guy.
I thought, that's pretty good-hearted for a lawyer
Oh, that's for sure.
that'll,
Yeah.
don't want any retainer. Next door there were Leatherwood's, let's see, I'm trying to think to be sure here. H.L. Rogers, Lloyd's father, had a business there. He and, I want to say, Linwood Massey. No, it may have been Pete Halsell. I'm not too sure about his partner. But he was a good guy too, and I'd go in there and hang out on Saturday nights. And I think sometimes I just kind of roam the streets, Tom.
I didn't too if I was allowed.
It couldn't anything hurt you in those days, because Bonham was nothing but good people, and maybe there's a few bootleggers he had out around, but they wouldn't harm you. Kind of tried to watch them because they were a point of curiosity, I'll say with you. You'd run across people like that, sure enough, down on the what we call the jockey ground on First Monday. That was like a county fair.
Every first Monday.
It really was. And across the street, of course, Frank Doss had a horse barn that he had his horses, and anybody else that had a horse and wanted to pay rent, oats and keep it. But anyway, where was it? Back at H.L. Rogers. I don't want to talk too much here.
Oh, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we want to hear you talk.
But anyway, H.L. Rogers, he was a good man. And going down the street, I'm trying to think. There's a skip in there. Was Linwood, was Carmichael, let's see, what they call it, Lewis Shoe Store. Lewis Shoe Store. And it was run by Linwood Massey and James Carmichael.
Was that Linwood Senior?
Yeah, that was, well, let's see, Linwood was district manager for Texas Power and Light.
Right, yeah.
Okay, it was his father.
Right.
And
okay.
Pearl was Mrs. Massey, and she was, Mrs. Massey was kind of like me, only they didn't have hearing aids in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Mrs. Massey, she just couldn't hear a thing in the world, I remember. And she was such a dear soul, she really was. Let's see, anyhow, I think the family bought all their shoes in there at Lewis Shoe Store. And pretty close by, now this is back there, and I just vaguely remember the sign. My mother worked for this guy for a while, I think. Max Hermer had a clothing store in there, and I don't know much about it except he was a nice looking man and of Jewish origin and ancestry. Anyway, he moved to Dallas sometime, about 1925 or 6, I think. And anyway, Peeler Drug at one time, before they came up to the corner, they were down there, and this is about 23 and 4. This is what I'm saying, you can't sequence anything. It's pretty hard to sequence. He and Reb it was, had a business. They were brothers. And they didn't exactly agree on everything. And Reb and he split. But their father was an old man, and I don't ever remember him talking. But he sat in a cane-bottom chair right on the street. You'd walk down the street barefooted and you'd say, "Good evening, Mr. Peeler." And you'd never acknowledge it. Had a little old round hat with a flat brim that he'd pull down. He'd be sitting there. Had a large stomach, and he'd sit in that cane-bottom chair. But it seemed like Ray was the driving force of that family at that time, and he and Reb split, of course. And I'm going somewhere in there about 1920 to 25. There was a plumbing store over there, Otto Keithley, and the reason I remember him in particular, he did all the plumbing. And in 26, when natural gas came to Bonham, he did a whole lot of work, showing people what to do with it, how to light it and keep from blowing themselves up, because it took a little education for a man that had been carrying a coal scuttle in, and wood into his house every day. That was my job down on 8th Street when I was 5 years old, to bring a coal scuttle in. Of course, that was pretty heavy, and I remember dragging it, and you'd get hollered at, "Don't drag it on the floor and carry it." So you'd have to make 2 runs, really, to get enough.
Who were your parents?
I'm sorry?
Who were your parents? Were you born in Fannin County? Or?
Yeah, I'm alleged to have been born here, yeah. But anyway, yes, they said, now, Mother came from Ladonia. You know Ladonia, and Daddy was from Gober.
Oh, okay.
But he was an office deputy for Bill Biggerstaff, and Bill is Barbara Gore's grandfather. See?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the connection
That's
with the Dorough and the
interesting.
Biggerstaff,
Yeah.
because we felt, or I wasn't here then, but this is about 1909 or something like that he worked for Bill Biggerstaff. But he was he was the office deputy, I guess, as I remember.
Yeah. Who did he get his
I'm
lawyer
sorry.
credentials? How did Deach get his lawyer credentials?
Well, he wasn't an attorney. He just sold real estate and
Oh,
insurance.
okay.
He felt like he was a lawyer because he sold so much insurance so much real estate. But actually, and that's another story I'd like to tell. If I could say anything good that would be remembered about Mr. Travis Lipscomb. He was a great guy. It was Judge Cunningham, Travis Lipscomb, and I don't know whether it was McMahon. There was another party in there that came in before their,
Wasn't one of the
that was a
couches?
part of their partnership, and he leaves. I guess it was Judge McMahon that was probably there. But anyway, I've got so many good memories about Mr. Lipscomb because, gosh, he was always getting me a little job delivering papers so I'd have enough money to go to the movies on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
That didn't take a lot of money for that.
No, that's right. He'd fix it so it would cost to go to Hardin's now and get a hamburger and then go to the movies. You could see 2 movies at one time. Go to the American and go to the Best, I think for 15 cents. And you had a 10-cent hamburger. Well, that made a heck of a Saturday afternoon.
That's true.
For a quarter.
But Mr. Lipscomb was always getting me a job, say for 50 cents, that I delivered circulars around town. He was always promoting some candidate, maybe for governor, attorney general, or something like that. And but I don't know, he's just good to me. One good story that I think about Mr. Lipscomb, he and Rab Ryan, according to what it was hearsay between the two, had the first radios in Bonham. Mr. Lipscomb had this huge antenna put up. You had to put one about 75 feet, and they were anchoring it and guying it. And when Ryan got through, Mr. Lipscomb turned it on. I believe the stations were something like WLW Chicago. That was New Orleans, wasn't it? WLW. You could get New Orleans and Chicago.
Yeah.
Nothing else, and it was just the static was terrible. But anyway, Mr. Lipscomb wanted me to come in and said, I got something to show you, Bobby. And I went inside. And here's this huge black box, with all these dials. And he works a long time, and it quit squeaking. And finally, he gets Chicago, I think, to the best of my memory. But I thought, what a memory there, to think of our computers and our phones and our telephones and whatnot today. Listen,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I don't know, I never would run down jumping back and forth on stories, but I was going to tell Tom I didn't think I was too qualified sometimes to recount the past. When a little bit ago I started at the front door and I get there and I say, did I turn the coffee maker off?
Yeah. Well, we all do that.
I hope that's true because I had to go back the second time, be sure I turned off my coffee pot. But I don't know, Mr. Lipscomb was just good to me. He really was.
Well, you were, so you grew up in Bonham?
Yes,
or
yes,
Dorough,
I
or,
did.
No, your folks had moved
They
here?
got married in Ladonia in the Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
It was a Dr. Bennett.
Uh-huh.
And I can't think of the Presbyterian minister that was the minister at the situation, but they got married there. And anyway, and for a long time, I would periodically live with my grandfather, who was out on what we call the Con Gap Pike.
Just keep talking. That's
Go
fine.
ahead.
Anyway, I'm just saying, I don't know how competent I might be when I remember things that happened in the 20s and 30s, and I started to the door a minute ago, and I had to stop and think, did I turn the coffee pot off? And I knew I had, but you
Happens to me all
had
the
to turn
time.
around and go check it the second time.
Right, I do that all the time.
I was talking to a doctor here a while back, and I said, I'm getting kind of worried. I'm scared of what happens to old people about a memory situation. And I said, I have 5 or 6 things that I want to get. I think I told you that the other night. But you know what, but I thought it was kind of cute. I said, I'd get home with 5 things, but I didn't get the other. And he said, don't be alarmed with that. The wife will send me to get eggs just down around the corner. And when I get there, I have to call. Find out, what'd you send me here for? And, but anyway, I guess that's the way life is. But you know what? You do get scared when you think about some of the people that you've known that begin to, through no fault of theirs, nature just plays that trick on them. I sure hope it doesn't happen.
One of the reasons I think you remember so much is because you're so interested in everything.
Well,
And that helps keep things
that may
rolling.
have something to do with it too. It very well could be. But I was always, during the Depression years, for example, I think I mentioned this the other night. When I was 13, Daddy said, "You need a job." And I said, "What can I do?" And he said, "You can show farms and get information on some of these places where the mortgage companies have turned over to me." And I said, "I can't drive a car." And he said, "Oh, you've seen me drive one. You'll learn." And he pitched me the keys and gave me a list of places to go find. In that day and time, the mortgage companies, though, would take over, would foreclose on a piece of land. They wouldn't even know where it was located. I think they're almost as bewildered in some of their loans on subprime stuff today as they were then. Of course, they may have a full description and everything about it, but they didn't know anything about the people they sold them to, see? And that's, I don't know, that just seems incredible that you could make loans and not know the person, have a good credit standing. Say, in those times, you would meet so many nice people out of, they'd come down to see the place, see? And you'd have a description of it that you'd gone out and planted and the number of acres in the place and how many acres would grow corn, cotton, and such as that. And they'd want to see it. But I met so many nice people in that time that I'd drive out and show them some of the places. I think the Chicago Joint Stock Land Bank, and I guess maybe that explains the type of mortgage. It was a merger, more or less, of the different banks. But there was a guy by the name of Grady, Mac Grady, that I'd show him, and he was such an interesting person. He lived on the top of a bank building in downtown Chicago, so he had a penthouse up there. And of course, I'd never met anybody of that stature economically, I'll say, and he was such fun to talk to. I love to hear his stories about he and his wife and how they spent their summers in France, and he loved to talk about it. And of course, just like here I am hunting the past in a sense, because it was a pleasant time. And but anyway, Mr. McGrady was quite a guy. Going down the street there, I'm trying to think where J.C. Penney was. I used to work at J.C. Penney, by the way, as a clerk when I was 18, and that's the first time I ever heard of Social Security. Seemed like we got about $1 and, I don't know, somewhere but less than $2 for a day's work, and would pay 35 cents of it in Social Security.
My goodness.
It was just that small, and here I am, I get...
Well, it was it's down on the corner there, corner of 5th and Main.
Okay.
Tim Davis wrote an article about that, and he got all that information, and that was substantiated. That's where it came in, what, 19...
I don't know.
Well, I can't remember exactly, but it was right down there on the corner.
Yeah. Across the street, there was I used to buy shells from a guy with the name of Bailey Hardware. And Mr. Bailey was a real tall, imposing sort of fellow, white-haired, and as I recall, he died, and then Raleigh Abernathy took the store, the hardware store, after him. But times were getting hard, and no matter how good a merchant a man was in that time, if he didn't have the business and people didn't have the money, the man church was out soon. It didn't take long. One of the most interesting scenes, and it was so pathetic, was the bakery down the way. I don't think Edgar Womack was the one that operated it for a long time, but somebody before that. But anyway, people would come in up here on the train, hobos, and they would just fan out over Bonham looking for something to eat. And their pitch was, "I'd like to have some cold bread or something." Somebody would, maybe one of them would have a nickel, and you'd go to the bakery and get 2 loaves in that day-old bread for a nickel. Wow. And then sit on the curb. And then maybe there'd be 100 or more people up there. That was what you call the Depression time, see. It was just sad to see people that wandered. Their only means of transportation, except to walk, was to ride the train. And of course, they'd try to keep them off of there, and a lot of them got hurt and worse by the railroad people, but I never did see any of that. That was just kind of hearsay, but what a time. But anyway, let's see, I was going to tell something up the street. Oh yeah, the newspaper office McDougal had a paper, the Favorite, Bottom Daily Favorite. Well, you probably know the history on that
I
better
know the
than
history
I
of
do.
the paper pretty good, but you go ahead and tell
But
tell
anyway-
me what you remember.
I just remember that was kind of the beginning point of my memory about the Bottom Daily Favorite. Was that it was there on Main Street. And say, down on the corner, Risser, Gene Risser and his brother,
Joe.
let's see,
Joe.
huh?
Joe.
No, Joe was his son.
Oh.
I'm thinking about
Oh,
his
yeah.
brother. If he lived over on Ninth Street. Let's see, what the heck was her name? Their name. Mrs. Risser was a nice lady, and she lived many years after this Risser died.
Was
But
he a
we
doctor?
Huh?
A doctor? No?
No, that was Dr. Joe.
Yeah.
Dr. Joe and I, not
Eugene
too.
Risser's, this is the daddy Eugene.
Oh.
I'm talking about their store. They had a dry goods store. There were only really two full-fledged dry goods stores where you could buy a suit and shirts and things like that, and that was the Spivies and the Rissers. But where
Are we still on Main Street down by the fair? Or are we somewhere else?
now wait a minute, maybe I didn't follow that.
Where was the store located?
Oh, it was located across, do you know where, well, on the corner was not Bonham Auto Parts, maybe it was where,
It was.
and then Gene Wilshire had a,
Right.
okay, directly across there was a huge, it's been torn down, it burned.
Yeah. Where they put
Something
that,
like 28 or 9,
right on the
maybe.
corner there.
Was that Abernathy's or something like that? It was a department store, wasn't it?
Well, the store across the Risser store burned sometime, I don't know, around, say, 1930.
Uh-huh.
But I'm trying to locate it for y'all because, and yet I've forgotten, after I leave the bakery and head north, I can't.
Okay, was it on the corner across from Bottom Auto?
Yeah.
Or was it across the street?
It was
from
across the street east.
Bottom? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That side
Where the
street
little
is,
station is now.
that side street
Okay,
is 6th
okay.
Street. See, it's at the corner of 6th and Main.
Okay.
In this side. But you know what was so odd about this, and you might find somebody that could recall this. They had a vaudeville show down at the movie that night that it burned. There was a woman, I believe it was, maybe a man, I just remember a person was hypnotized. And on the vacant lot over there, they buried her. And they had a pipe coming up. People were driving by and looking at it, and she's hypnotized. She's in the ground. And the thing burnt. They were going to dig her up the next day. The thing caught fire that night. And it was so hot, they were trying to get in there, dig the thing. But I hope you're not putting this down unless you can find somebody that can corroborate it, because it was weird. I think everybody in Fannin County nearly got there
Ah, won't doubt it.
for that thing. I wish Rev Ryan was around to help me.
Wow.
But can you imagine? But they got her out. She's okay, but I think she came to pretty quick after the
she did too.
hypnotic spell. But you know, they'd have these shows that would come to the American theater, and I don't know, stage shows. I even remember Tioga man Gene Autry.
Autry, yeah.
And friend Smiley Burnett, they had a show there at one time. Now, this is a little bit after. I guess that was about 1932. Bonham had grown up by then. But anyway, they'd have these shows, and everybody'd go to vaudeville in those days. Good picking music, and it was kind of the type of music that you would, sort of like Dixieland, only it was string. Music, and it was a good time for roadshow. But they too went along and disappeared with other changes. I don't know much about what they call the old Opera House. That was across from it's Bonham Lumber now, I think. But we used to have we had high school dances in there.
Did
Had a
you
couple kind of we sponsored it and got approval. You know, sort of. They didn't exactly, through the school system, approve of school dances in those days. That was kind of a devilish thought, you know.
What year did you graduate
In
from?
1938.
1938?
Yeah. See, I was born in 1920. See, I want to talking about the school system, I want to make one comment about the nicest schoolman that I ever met, and that was W.T. White. Hey, you know who I'm talking. Okay.
Very well.
Yeah.
You may have worked. Did you work around him?
I worked for him, and he told me one time that, how in the hell do you know you're right? Yeah, I know that.
Well, you know what? When I was in the first and second grade, Tom, he was the superintendent here in Bonham. And he was such a, he was another tall, he was tall to us,
Tall
but he
indeed.
was a nice looking guy and had a very commanding way. And I noticed he's the only man that I ever saw him come and visit the class like they used to do, and maybe they still do. But anyway, he'd even make Minnie Gribble nervous.
Well, let me tell you this.
Minnie Gribble would beat you to death. Oh, don't put that on.
I went to, he had a convocation of every teacher in the district every year.
Uh-huh.
And every year he told a Minnie Gribble story.
Is that
And
right?
there wasn't anybody in the whole audience but Jimmy Tate and I knew what he was talking about.
Oh, my word. She was something. I always talk about schools. I guess I never was such an outstanding student by any means, but I would end up with a B average, you know, kind of like that. But I had a brother that, I don't know, he never made anything but A's, see, and they were always saying, you can do as well as Dwight, and it went on like that all my life. But anyway, I remember one time that they were interviewing the mothers, and they were discussing each child, and mother went for her visitation with Fanny Culpepper. And of course, Fanny, I guess, she was the only one that ever beat Dwight's seat for something, and that, of course, that crushed mother. He just didn't think there was anything he could do that deserved a lick. But anyway, Annie started telling her about what a good child I was at school. This sounds like I'm buttering myself up. Now, Bob is a real nice student. And, but you know what? He's a whole lot better than Dwight. Oh man, that just started the trouble all over again. Did you ever know my brother?
No, but I knew Miss Culpepper.
But, you know, me, Idris Evans and Fanny Culpepper were dear souls. Now, I'm not going to say anything one way or another about Minnie Gribble. Man, she was mean.
Yes, she was.
She's
She was.
tough.
Well, I thought so much of Miss Culpepper. I left school one day. It took me 2 hours to walk home.
I get to talking to two friends of mine that are still surviving that time, and I talk about the teachers we had, and they don't remember them, and it breaks my heart to think
I agree.
that they wouldn't recall. We had a lady that came in here from somewhere off a ranch near Pampa, and her father was a rancher, and she never knew anything as a girl except growing up on the ranch and roping cattle, branding them, and helping do other work. But she went to school in Canyon, Texas. What is that? That's West Texas? But anyway, she's a good one. And when she'd get attention in the class, it was so funny. She'd leave the room. Of course, everybody'd go to talking. She'd come in and she'd stick her fingers in there and she could split your head with that whistle. I don't know. She just seemed to like to do that, but it would just echo throughout the building. But I believe she could turn a calf with whistling that way. Boy, she got attention by it, though. We had another good teacher that was so good in those days, and that was Elva Atherton. I don't know whether you ever heard of her. And there was some Miss Shields music. But it does hurt me when I think about those dear souls that I thought much of, that nobody, they can't find anybody that remembers them, or the ones that did are not here.
What did y'all do for entertainment when you were in high school?
Huh?
What did you do for entertainment when you were in high school?
We'd play football on church lots, school lots, Bailey English mainly, or the Methodist church. There was a vacant lot on the east side of the Baptist church, you know, the old church, and we'd play baseball, football there. And in that day and time, part of the entertainment was being a Boy Scout when you got to be 12. Lloyd Rogers was a good scoutmaster. He wasn't real pushy about getting past second, first class, you know. But he just thought that it ought to be something that you'd have fun at, and not for education. It was an entertaining feature.
Now Lloyd Rogers
It's
is,
Lloyd and James are brothers.
okay, because I know James.
Yeah, James
so
and Lloyd
they're
were brothers.
brothers.
We called him Bull in those days.
Oh.
And he would, yeah, Bull Rogers. We'd gang up on him when we'd go to the scout camp in those times.
Was that the scout group trip that met at the Methodist Church?
This one, the old, what I call the Union Presbyterian Church is where we met. You know, where
Yeah.
across from the old Clendenin place.
Right.
But anyway, we'd meet there mainly. Now, we met at the Baptist church for a while, and you'd play pig. I don't know whether you ever played pig, and not throwing a tennis ball, and you'd call a number and drop the ball and run to the other ball. And whoever the number was had to come and get the ball, and they'd throw it at somebody. And of course, the rules were not to throw at people's heads, but that was the first thing you threw at. Oh, gosh. Oh, me.
Well, who were your friends? Who were some of your close friends?
Charles Goen, Gregory Baker. Now, this is in grade school, and they are still alive. They're still
I
alive.
met Gregory Baker. Isn't he the one from Dallas?
Yes, they're both in
I
Dallas.
met him at the Red River Catfish place with all of
Yeah,
you.
right. Well, now, wait a minute. That was Bill Richards. He was a year
and Bill.
younger than we were.
And Bill, of course.
Yeah. I've kind of researched it a little bit. There was, as I recall, 105 that graduated in 1938, and I don't believe there's a half a dozen still alive. But a lot of them got killed and didn't come back from World War II. And I don't know, Wright Russell and I don't know, Rogers Rainey and we had a good deal going with the boys and the girls in that day and time. We were, about all going to the 10:30 at the same time, or dances, or maybe going other places we shouldn't have.
See, the state park hadn't been.
Yeah.
Hadn't been in 1938. It just started in 1936 is when they dug the state park.
At where they had the Nickelodeon at the park, they got a kind of an asphalt dance place out there. We'd meet out there real often, and that was, I know, when Russell joined the Air Force and I joined the Marine Corps, and let's see, somebody else, But anyway, we had what we called kind of a going away party, boy, and that was kind of the end, really, of that bunch. There must have been, I don't know, there was 75 to 100 of us out there that night. And I don't remember ever being together with the bunch again. Of course, some of them didn't
get back, yeah.
But
well, you were in the Marine Corps in World War. You were in the Marine Corps
Yes.
in World War II.
yes, I joined in June. That was a time, 1942. That was a time when I don't know. They were just lined up to enlist.
I know.
I went down there to join the Corps, and they said, you'll have to come back on such and such a day. We just got 2 minutes to process today.
You've got to tell about your story about how you served, where you served during the war.
Well, that's another thing. I don't know whether you could sequence. Of course, we went to, first of all, I want to say that a bunch from Bonham went on the same troop train. We got sworn in. Anyway, let's see, that was Eddie Smith, Joe Lowry, Harold English, Claude McClure. Claude was a brother of Miss Colt, and to identify that one. And let's see, and myself, there was one more. But anyway, we left. I remember when they swore us in. I mean, they were so nice and polite. It was kind of amusing. Great big old bunch of boys, see. And then they call us to attention after they give us the oath. And they say, now you son of a bitches, left face. And they marched us, they marched us out the door into the troop train, and we were off in 30 minutes. They had the troop train waiting. There must have been, I guess, about 250 of us that day. I know D.L. Watson took us all over there, crammed us all in the car. I guess you've heard of D.L. But anyway, he's out there, and when we come down the stairs, he said, "I wish there's something else that I could do for you boys." And Smith said, "Thank you, DL. You've done quite enough." I don't know why you remember those things, but we laughed about that for a long time. But anyway, when you get we went to Los Angeles, and then you take a troop train south to San Diego, and you go through 7 months of boot camp. And I had a little bit of mess duty in there, but anyhow, then you go overseas, and I went to Pearl Harbor, and we got some further training at a place called Malakoli. Went first to what was the barracks? Schofield, and then out to Hickam, and then from Hickam across the fence to a place called Camp Catlin. And then at Catlin, they sent us to Malakoli, and we learned 30 calibers, 50 calibers, 40 millimeters, and then 90. You had to learn them all, so to speak, and then you were just expected to know about infantry service because you didn't know which way they'd swap you. But anyway, we left there and went by somewhere close to Palmyra Island. That's where they had a little Marine base. But we didn't stop there. We went on to New Hebrides, and they let us off. And I better not describe some of the things, but a lot of people were sick in there at that time. And we even got spinal meningitis aboard. And I'll tell you what, everybody's scared when somebody dies that's close to you there. It makes you a little nervous. But anyway, I shouldn't tell that. But we went on from there to Maleta, and then across to Guadalcanal and Tulagi. And then and we used that kind of as a staging area. And then we went on east, it would be, to the Russell Island, where we what we would do, they'd have airstrip, had Henderson Field rather, which was a rather huge field for the time. And then they were building an airstrip in the Russells, and we moved in at night. They put us on barges, flat type ships with their guns and the ammo, and we'd hear the Japs had air superiority at that time for, I don't know, 6 more months. I guess it was that long, maybe longer. But anyhow, you'd make a phosphorescent wake with where the propeller and I know we'd have to cut the engines, and we'd coast, and in the darkness you could see an island here, and you'd think, boy, if they see us, maybe I can swim that far, I don't know, but you'd cut it off, and they'd come in low, but they couldn't see any better probably. They were looking for those wakes, see? But we left at night, landed at night. It was only about 35 miles over to this place, and it was almost so close, Tom, that some days we thought we could hear them warming up over at over at Rendova, I think it was. I got on one time when I was at a place called Moco there, and we had a gun emplacement there, and I got on a mail boat to run an errand for the battalion or the company commander. And anyway, I was going to a place called Pavuvu. I catch this little old mail boat, and we start out, get in a thunderstorm, get lost. He doesn't know what this coxswain or bosun's mate, whatever it was, he didn't know what the heck was going on. So after a while of wandering around, bailing water with our pith helmets, and he had plenty of diesel there that we were putting in there when we'd run out. And we heard airplane engine, and we came out of a cloud bank and saw the end of an airstrip. And anyway, somebody said, "Oh, we're back to Bonica at last." I remember saying, "The heck you are, that's New Georgia. You're looking at it warming up Jap Zeros," and we weren't a half a mile offshore. But you talk about a fast U-turn. We got back in the cloud and the rain and went on east and found Bonica. But I never would forget. I thought, boy, if they were getting ready to make a run over that way and straight for our strip where we were. Say, Bill Freeman was with a group in that area.
Yes,
and
he was in Guadalcanal.
Huh?
He was in Guadalcanal, wasn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
over at Henderson Field.
Yeah.
He was with Joe Foss's outfit.
Yes.
And but anyway, he was there, and also he was at the Russell thing, which was a little closer to the.
Well, I was going to ask if you ever ran into, when you were in the islands, if you ran into any
just
people
one
from-
time. He is one person, but I didn't get to talk to him, really. I just recognized him. But they'd get off of these planes, and they wouldn't land there unless they were just shot all to heck or out of fuel.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'd reload there, get more, whatever. I never did help load a plane. I was just always in a gun emplacement.
Well, wasn't there a story about how you got to be a yeoman?
Let's see now.
Because you could type?
Huh?
Because you could type?
Oh, yeah. I was on a gun crew, and they were getting ready to go to New Georgia for the landing there. And they were going to use Army troops for the landing, but they needed Marines to go in first and set up on the beach. Well, they said, Dorough, it's your time. So I go down and get on the Higgins boat. And we get out about, 100 yards from the shore. And here comes the major running. He said, hey, I never did get my name straight. Mm-hmm. Nobody could ever say Dorough, but they could say Dorough. So I just took the name Dorough. But anyway, we get out about 100 yards and he calls us back and he said, I can see that Dorough can use a typewriter, and I may need a typist sometime if we don't hang on to the two that we have over at battalion headquarters. So I get off, take all my gear off, and he puts a young fellow from Mississippi in my place. And they got hit sometime in the first few hours on the beach with a bomb. They set up a 90mm gun, and they took a direct hit, killed every one of them. And I don't know, my mind went back to Mrs. Ruark and our visit one time in the hall over at school. She wanted me to take typing, and I said, oh, Ms. Ruark, nobody but girls take typing. And she said, do it, Bob, just for me, see? Well, I took typing, and I told her that story about how her persuasive way saved my life.
Wow.
But she was real touched by that.
Well, how long were you?
You can't help but be a little
Yeah.
sentimental about these dear people
I
that
guess-
save your skin.
Really?
But she and her sister were Ms. Ike Biggerstaff. They were two great people, I thought.
Uh-huh.
On 8th Street, where I grew up, John Moss and Cecil and Ms. Ruark, they lived just up at the Baptist church there so we weren't too far apart. I thought it was so funny that when I came back in 1944 in December, she got in touch with me and she said, if you can locate John, John Moss had gotten in the Corps at that time. She said, kind of look after him for me. And I thought, man, gosh, look after John Moss. I need him to look after me.
That's our son.
He was a scout sniper in the Corps,
Oh,
and so, man, they had a job, kind of a hard job too. I don't know. Hope I'm not
No.
running y'all.
No.
Oh, we got plenty of time, don't we? And we enjoy listening to your stories.
I don't know. I'm covering a lot of ground there between say 1945 and 1925. That's kind of a.
Well,
You can go back and bring any favorite story you want.
yeah, you can. When did you get out of the service in 44?
Did I what?
Did you get out of the military, out of the Marine Corps in 44, or were you in until after the war ended?
Oh, no, I got out on points. And if you understand that, I was in there really for a 4-year, or actually for the time of the national emergency. Okay, well, because of having 2 battle stars and some other things, I got out a little early on points. They call those points. And I got out in October of 1945. The war was over in August 12th?
August. Yeah.
Something like that.
It was in,
But anyway, I got out really before a whole lot of people. Of course, a lot of people were getting out at that time. But still, some of us got out earlier.
Not much, though. Not much.
No, that's true. Maybe 60 days, but
Yeah. What did you do after you got out of the military?
Well, the first thing I did was buy a train ticket to New York. I'd never, and I don't know. I think sometimes you can get more trouble in New York by yourself. See, I was by myself than you could out there on Bonica or Pavuvu or Moco or whatever. You know what? I told you my story about John Kennedy, didn't I? Did I tell you that?
I don't think so.
I'm walking down the beach one day at Bonica, and this, as I remember, it was June. The sun was just beautiful. Not a cloud in the sky. Here comes this chug, chug, chug torpedo boat. We call them. That's not the name of them, you know.
PT.
Huh?
PT.
PT boat. Yes. Anyway, here comes this PT boat, and it will just hardly run, and it sputters and goes out, and then it starts again, and the guy swings real wide. Here's this big tall guy in shorts in the back end of the PT boat, and he revs up his engine, he heads for the pier, and then he backs his engine and it dies, and he hits the end of the pier and tears up the bow. And I remember the guy that was with him, and there may have been more, but I only remember two, and I guess you'd call him a mate. But anyway, his mate said, I didn't hear the name, but he said, "You think you're going to get in trouble and get a court-martial over this?" And of course, I didn't hear the answer, but I'm not more than the front door away and just watching. Well, there was a sergeant standing there in the Marines, and I said something to him, and he said, he's worried about whether he's going to get a court-martial over this, just like that. But anyway, I walk on down the beach. Some years after that, I was reading a book about PT Boat 109, I think it was, John Kennedy's story about his life in the Pacific, and he tells that story just like I remembered it. And I said, my gosh, there I was standing there, not 10, 20 yards, I'll say, from a president of the United States, and I didn't go over and just talk to him. But I don't know, that just always kind of shook me when I thought about it. I remember reading that in the book, and I just threw it down that day. And just kind of thought about that time on Bonica. You have lots of coincidences like that you just, like a good visit, sitting in the mess hall, and here comes three officers in, and you don't pay much attention. And of course, the guy in front of you, he jumps up and getting to attention and nearly turns the table over on you, and finally you see, hey, that's Nimitz and Arnold. They were on an inspection.
Oh my gosh.
You see what I mean? They come over, and with three of us sitting there, and of course by that time we're rigid. And he tells us to sit down and at ease and so on, and he talked to us sometime, but that was a good time in my memory right there. That was at Inuitak. A lot of people never heard much about Inuitak, but it was pretty important. You had Kwajalein, and I think the Marines took Kwajalein, and then they came on to Inuitak. Kwajalein wasn't much of a thing, but I don't believe that more than our casualties, and there was an Army unit that went in too. I think they lost about 150 maybe, and the Japs lost 3,700. And I had a good friend. He slept in the tent, and there was about 5 or 6 of us in the tent together. This is one of the coincidences in my life that I just marvel at in a way. But anyway, his name was John, as best I remember. That's about, you can't remember it all.
Yeah.
But anyway, John and I would talk about funny things. Like he'd say, I wrote a story to Reuters today, and I put it on the colonel's desk for censorship, and here's what it got back, and it says, Reuters News Agency, John so-and-so. I mean, he just took a razor blade and cut the whole center out, wouldn't let him send anything after he'd worked, and he was laughing about it. But when we went into Inuitak, we went in landing boats, and he's up in the bow, and we were talking about it, and then we hit the beach, and I don't see him anymore. you're just scrambling, looking, for dig you a hole or something. But anyway, not too long ago, I'm gonna say 6, 7 years ago, I'm reading a story about a writer. He was called a war correspondent. That's what they called him in that time. But and he'd work on with his little old typewriter and write stories. But anyway, I'm reading a thing from John Graves, and he lived at what is it, west of Fort Worth over there. Anyway, it's a good-sized town. But anyway, he was talking about one day when we went into an island, and he described the scene of Inuit just perfectly, and then he talked about how I hope I'm not talking out of turn on this, how they disposed of the Japanese dead, piling them up. But anyway, he described the thing and gave the number, and I thought, that was my friend. And he's quite a journalist and writer. I think I got 5 of his books after that and read them, and I kept them out at the house. But I even went to, where is it they have the dinosaurs west of?
Glen Allen? Is
what?
it Glen Rose? Glen Rose, right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's his whole, he lives out in the country, and he's just kind of a fellow that's, he and his wife and his family lived in the country and wrote, and he he had a degree from Texas, and he studied in England, and but I don't know. I know that was the same man. I know the same John because there wasn't any other people in that time. I'm not talking too much. I'm getting kind of off on some of my
that's all right.
memories.
I'm just watching I'm watching to see that it doesn't.
But anyway, I went to see what I thought might have been John Graves, the one that I knew, and I never could find anybody that knew him. I couldn't find him in the dictionary, and and it kind of came up a thunderstorm that day, so I just headed back home. But I still think that one day, because he was such who were we talking about, Bedichek the other day? He was kind of a guy like Bedichek. He loved nature. He loved to write about nature and restoration of farm.
How long ago was it when you were looking for him?
It must have been, it's been around 5 or 6 years. He may have died by now.
Yeah.
But he's near as old as I am.
The new manager out at Brookshire's came from Glen Rose.
Is that right? The manager.
The manager of Brookshire's came from Glen Rose.
I'm
I'm
gonna ask him.
Well,
I started to write him a letter. And you start something like that and you say, someday I'll go out there. I want to talk to him because we were pretty good friends.
Sure.
You'd have friends that way in the Corps, and then they'd disappear and you'd never hear from them again. One guy was a good friend of mine. I worked with the Message Center a lot, and at a certain time, and that was. He lived in Pelham Bay, New York. That's in the Bronx, actually. He's just a New Yorker and from the Bronx, really. But he'd been to New York University, and he'd been to Fordham, which was a little unusual to find a Marine because most of them were, I don't know, it was just kind of a foreign legion in that day. Oh boy, but I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you had some adventures for a
Yeah,
boy from Fannin County.
was. I wish I could sequence it all and just sit down and make sense. But I guess, it's hard to take. I was overseas a little bit over 26 months. And it's hard to take 26 months of your life when most of it was in jungle, and I don't know, you just weren't impressed with the rains and the mud and such as that. I sound like I'm trying to exaggerate, I'm not. But people don't know what the infantry that went into Guadalcanal, they don't have any idea what those people went through. And I wasn't in that bunch. I came in after they went in August, I think, of 42. They were trying to get a foothold in the Pacific so they could start their island hopping. And I was just a part of the second island that they went into. But man, they didn't have anything to eat. They slept in the mud. They didn't have any clean clothes. And that's important when you just have old muddy clothes with saying it's raining all the time. You got to keep your rifle clean.
I mean,
But I've talked to some of those fellas, you wouldn't believe some of the stories they could tell.
Well, when you you came back and lived in Bonham
Yes.
after the war was over, and you're a rancher. Is that what you did? Did you
Well,
raise cattle?
When
or-
I came back, I worked with my father selling real estate again.
Okay.
And for a number of years, and then I ran for district clerk, and I got elected district clerk. I stayed 5 years in the courthouse
Okay.
as district clerk, and I don't know, I cashed in all of my holdings trying to. I had 4 children by that time, see, married before that, and I don't know, I was going broke on $4,200 a year. See?
Yeah.
And that's what you got. And anyway, I was elected to a second term. I served 1 year. Somebody came in the courthouse in my office one day and said, they need somebody at the post office. Why don't you get that job? And I said, what can you make out of it? And they said, well, it's so much an hour, you can substitute half of the time and make twice it,
Yeah.
You just would starve to death in those days. So I
Yeah.
just,
So you went to the post office.
I went down and took I talked to Mr. Schuler, it was at that time, and he said, well, the first thing you'd have to do is take a civil service exam, and it was going to be one next week, I think, over at Sherman. So I went over there, and there was something like 350 to 400 people taking
Wow.
it, and there were 3 of us that made the top. And this is not for the record, but we were tied for the same
Position?
for the same number of points. And he said, "You had military time, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you get 3 points extra for that."
Wow.
Wow.
And do you want the job? Do you want to use it? It's your option. And I said, "You bet. I need a job." So I went to work at the post office,
Uh-huh.
and then I quit the job up there, and I took quite a kicking over that, because people felt like, we elected you to office and y'all served it out. But I also needed to survive,
Yes, and
and
yeah,
I don't mean to sound,
Well, yeah, I've been there.
huh?
I've been there.
Well,
I know.
God bless you then if you decided
Well, I was making a
for
whole lot
Tom.
less money than
That's
that.
all you can go by, I decide for Tom. You know what?